Reddit relationship stories. My husband confessed he had been faking happiness for 6 years. What he said next saved our marriage. My name is Laura. I am 41 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, and 16 months ago my husband sat across from me at our kitchen table on a Sunday morning and told me he had been faking happiness for 6 years. Not unhappy with me specifically. Not unhappy with our children. Not looking for an exit or carrying a secret that was about to detonate. He had been faking a general happiness, a performed contentment with the shape of his life, because he had not known how to say that something fundamental was missing without it sounding like an accusation toward me or toward everything we had built. My husband's name is Paul. We had been married for 11 years and had 3 children. Oliver, who is 10, Grace, who is 8, and Sam, who is 5. Paul worked as an architect and had always been someone I described to people as even-keeled, steady, reliable, not given to dramatic emotional expression in either direction. I had understood this as personality. I had been partially right. What I had not understood was that underneath the evenness there had been a slow accumulation of something that Paul described, in the kitchen that Sunday morning, as the feeling of having become a function rather than a person. He had been a husband function, a father function, a provider function, an architect function. He had been performing all of these roles competently and had lost, somewhere in the performance, the thread of who he actually was outside of them. He had been in therapy for 4 months before he told me. His therapist had helped him find language for something he had been unable to name, and the naming had made the telling possible. He told me on a Sunday, because Sundays were when we had historically had the most uninterrupted time, and he had been planning the conversation for 3 weeks, and had chosen the moment carefully. I listened to everything Paul said without interrupting. This was not natural for me. I am someone who responds, who engages, who processes out loud, but I understood in the first minutes of his telling that what he needed was to be heard completely before anything else happened. When he finished, I asked him one question. I asked him what would help. He had an answer because he had been working on the answer in therapy for 4 months. He needed time that was entirely his. Not family time, not couple time, his time. He needed to find out what he actually wanted to do when nobody needed anything from him. He needed me to know who he was becoming rather than assume I already knew. We restructured our life over the following months in ways that were practical and significant. Paul has Saturday mornings. Entirely his, no negotiation, no family activities scheduled, no expectations. He has used those Saturday mornings to discover that he likes hiking, that he had missed drawing for himself rather than for clients, and that 3 hours of unstructured time every week has done more for his presence the rest of the week than anything else we have tried. I have my own restructuring. Things I realized in the process of paying attention to Paul that I had also been putting down without noticing. We are in couples therapy. Our therapist says what Paul did. Telling me the truth even when the truth was hard to shape was one of the more courageous things she has seen a spouse do in her practice. I think she is right. I also think I had created conditions in our marriage where the truth had felt hard to shape, and that examining those conditions has been as important as anything Paul brought to the table. Update 4 months later. Paul showed me a drawing last month. Something he had done on a Saturday morning, just for himself, no client, no brief. It was detailed and specific and entirely unlike the work he does professionally. He had been drawing a house that did not exist for no reason, except that he wanted to draw it. He showed it to me the way you show someone something you have made when you are not sure how they will receive it, and I looked at it for a long time, and I told him it was extraordinary. He said he did not know if it was good. I told him good was not the point, and that he knew that. He nodded. He has drawn 6 more since then. None of them are for anyone. All of them are on the wall of the small room in our house that is his. Story 2 Reddit relationship stories. I left my fiance at the altar and the reason was something I saw in the mirror 20 minutes before the ceremony. My name is Rebecca. I am 34 years old. I live in Austin, Texas. And 2 years ago I left my fiance at the altar in the most literal sense. He was standing at the end of an aisle in a venue we had rented for 140 people, and I was in a bridal suite 20 minutes from walking down that aisle. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and understood with a clarity I had not had in the 2 years of our engagement that I could not walk through that door. My fiance's name was Andrew. We had been together for 4 years and engaged for 2, and I had spent all of that time believing that the anxiety I felt about the wedding was normal pre-wedding anxiety, and that the specific heaviness I carried when I thought about our future was the weight of a big decision rather than a signal about the decision itself. The mirror told me nothing I did not already know. That is the honest answer to what happened in that bridal suite. I did not receive new information. Received a moment of clarity about information I had been holding and avoiding for 2 years, and the clarity arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony, because clarity does not always arrive on schedule. I called my maid of honor into the bridal suite. Her name is Dana, and she has been my best friend since we were 19. And she came in and looked at my face and said, "What is happening?" I told her I could not do it. She did not argue with me. She asked me if I was certain. I told her I had never been more certain of anything in my life, and that the certainty was terrifying because of what it meant and what it was going to cost, and that I was going to do it anyway because doing it now costs less than doing it in 5 years. Dana went to get Andrew. The conversation between Andrew and me happened in that bridal suite with Dana standing outside the door. Andrew was in his suit. He had been standing at the altar. He came in and looked at me, and I told him I could not marry him, and that I was so sorry and that the failing was mine, that I had not been honest with myself or with him about my doubts, and that I had let us get to a room full of people because I had not had the courage to be honest sooner. Andrew did not yell. He went very still and very pale, and he asked me if there was anything he could say. I told him there was not, and that I was sorry, and I meant both of those things completely. The 140 people were informed by Andrew's brother, who made a brief and dignified announcement, while Andrew and I sat in that bridal suite for another hour talking about 4 years, and what they had been, and what they had not been. The social aftermath was significant. People had opinions. People expressed those opinions to me directly and indirectly for several months. Andrew's family was understandably devastated. My family was supportive in the specific careful way of people who are relieved and trying not to show it too clearly. Andrew and I have not spoken since that afternoon. I know through mutual friends that he is doing well and is in a new relationship. I am genuinely glad for both of those things. I spent the following year in therapy working on what the 2 years of avoided clarity had been about. What in me had allowed me to get to a mirror in a bridal suite 20 minutes before a ceremony rather than a conversation 6 months earlier? What I found was not a simple answer. It was a complicated one about what I had learned about love and commitment from watching the people who raised me, and about what I had believed I was supposed to want, and what I had actually wanted, and about the distance between those two things that I had been traveling without examining for 34 years. I am not engaged to anyone. I am not in a relationship. I am, for the first time in my adult life, entirely comfortable with that. Update 3 months later. Dana and I had dinner last month. The two of us, the same restaurant where we had celebrated my engagement 2 years ago. We did not plan that specifically. It was just the restaurant we had always gone to, but we noticed it when we sat down and we acknowledged it, and then we ordered wine and talked for 3 hours about everything that had happened and everything that was happening now. At some point Dana said she had been proud of me for what I had done in that bridal suite, and that she had been proud of me every day since. I told her the courage had come late. She said it had come exactly when it needed to come, and that late and exactly right were sometimes the same thing. I have been thinking about that ever since. Story 3 Reddit relationship stories. My wife told me she had fallen out of love with me, then told me exactly what she had fallen in love with in the first place. My name is James. I am 44 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 18 months ago my wife of 13 years sat across from me and said she had fallen out of love with me. She said it clearly and without cruelty and with the specific directness of someone who has been working up to saying something for a long time, and has finally decided that not saying it is worse than saying it. Her name is Catherine. We had met when I was 31 and she was 29 and had been together for 15 years, married for 13, had 2 daughters, Sophie who is 11 and Anna who is 8. I want to tell you what Catherine said after she said she had fallen out of love with me, because the after is what this story is actually about. After she said she had fallen out of love with me, she told me what she had fallen in love with in the first place. She said she had fallen in love with a man who had been curious, who had read widely and thought deeply and had wanted to talk about ideas at 2 in the morning, because the ideas were too interesting to wait. She had fallen in love with a man who had been playful, who had surprised her, who had made her laugh in unexpected moments, who had not taken the serious things so seriously that the lighter things had no room. She had fallen in love with a man who had been present in a specific way, not just physically present but attentive, alive to her, interested in what she was experiencing rather than what he was managing. She said somewhere in 13 years of mortgage and children and career pressure, and the accumulation of adult responsibility, that man had become someone else, someone competent and reliable, and essentially absent in the ways that had mattered to her most. She said she was not blaming me. She said she had watched it happen and had not known how to stop it, and had not said anything clearly enough early enough, and that the failure was shared. She said she was telling me now because telling me was the last thing she could try before she gave up on trying. I sat with everything Catherine said for a long time. Then I asked her if she was willing to try with me rather than giving up. She said she was there, sitting across from me, because yes. We went into couples therapy that week. Our therapist had a phrase she used in our second session that I have thought about every day since. She said that people do not fall out of love with people. They fall out of love with the version of the person who no longer shows up. I had stopped showing up in the ways Catherine had loved. The competent, reliable version had shown up every day. The curious, playful, present version had gone somewhere in the management of adult life, and had not been invited back. Inviting him back has been the work of 18 months. It has been deliberate and sometimes awkward and occasionally exactly right. I read things now and tell Catherine about them at dinner. I make plans that are surprising rather than efficient. I ask her what she is experiencing rather than assuming I already know. Catherine told me 3 months ago that she had remembered something. She said she had remembered why she had married me. I told her I had been working hard on giving her reasons to remember. She said she knew and that the working hard was visible and that it mattered. Update: 4 months later. Sophie asked us last month if we were happy. She is 11 and perceptive in the way of children who have absorbed the texture of their household. Catherine and I looked at each other across the kitchen, and I said yes and Catherine said yes, and Sophie looked at us for a moment in the way children assess the truth of what adults say, and then she said good, and went back to her homework. Catherine looked at me after Sophie left the room. She said she had meant it. I said I knew. We had dinner and helped with homework and went to bed, and I lay there thinking about a woman who had told me she had fallen out of love with me and who had meant yes when asked if she was happy 18 months later. And I thought that the distance between those 2 points was the most important distance I had ever traveled. Story 4: Reddit relationship stories. I found out my boyfriend had a secret daughter he had never mentioned. She was 7 years old and she called him every Sunday, "My name is Amanda. I am 32 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and 14 months ago I discovered that my boyfriend of 2 years had a 7-year-old daughter he had never mentioned to me. I found out because I answered his phone on a Sunday afternoon when he was in the shower. He had asked me to check if his mother was calling because they had plans, and the voice on the other end was a child who said, "Hi Daddy, it is me." I said, "This is not Daddy," and the child said, "Oh," and then there was a brief silence, and then the child said, "Who are you?" and I said I was a friend, and the child said, "Oh, okay," and then said, "Can you tell Daddy I called?" and I said yes, and I ended the call, and I sat on the couch with his phone in my hand, and I waited for him to come out of the shower. My boyfriend's name is Ryan. He is 34 years old, and we had been together for 2 years, and I had believed in those 2 years that I knew the significant things about him. His daughter's name is Lily. She is 7 years old, and she lives in Denver with her mother, and she calls her father every Sunday because that is the arrangement they have. Ryan had this arrangement for the entirety of our 2-year relationship, and had not told me about it. He came out of the shower and saw my face and stopped in the doorway, and I held up his phone and said, "Lily called." Ryan went through the specific sequence of expressions of someone who has been discovered in something they have been hiding, and who is deciding in real time how to respond. He sat down. He told me about Lily, that she had been born from a relationship that had ended before Lily was born, that he and Lily's mother had a co-parenting arrangement that was primarily financial and phone-based because the distance between their cities made physical visits infrequent, that he had not told me because he had not known how to introduce the information early, and then the longer he had not told me the harder it had become. I asked him when he had planned to tell me. He said he had been planning to tell me when things between us became more serious. I told him 2 years was serious. He said he had not been certain I would stay if I knew. I sat with that for a long time. The question of whether I would have stayed if I had known at the beginning was one I could not answer honestly, because I had not been given the opportunity to answer it at the beginning. What I could tell him was that I could not answer it now either, because now was not the beginning and 2 years had already happened, and I needed time to think. I took 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks I thought about what Ryan had told me and about Lily, and about what it meant that he had hidden something this significant for 2 years, and about whether the hiding said something about how he thought about me or about how he thought about himself. At the end of 2 weeks I told Ryan I was willing to continue the relationship with conditions, that I wanted to know Lily in whatever way was appropriate and at a pace that was right for her, that I wanted full transparency about his co-parenting arrangement going forward, and that if there was anything else he had not told me he needed to tell me now. Ryan told me 2 more things. Neither of them were as significant as Lily, but both of them were things he had been holding, and I received them as part of the same pattern. A man who managed difficult information by not sharing it, and who needed to learn a different way. We are still together. I met Lily 4 months ago on a video call that was brief and age-appropriate, and that Lily ended by saying "Bye Daddy's friend," which made Ryan laugh in a way that was real. We have had 3 video calls since. Last month Lily showed me a drawing she had made and asked if I liked it, and I told her it was wonderful, and she said thank you and went to find her mother. I sat after the call for a moment thinking about a child who calls her father every Sunday, and who had no idea for 2 years that her father had not told his girlfriend she existed, and I thought about what it means to be honest with children even when you are not honest with adults, and I thought that Lily deserved better, and that the better was something Ryan and I were now building together. Update 3 months later. Ryan told Lily about me properly last month. Not as Daddy's friend, but as someone Daddy cared about who wanted to know her. Lily asked Ryan if I was nice. Ryan told her yes. Lily asked if I liked dogs because she has a dog named Biscuit. Ryan told her I loved dogs. Lily said okay then, and went back to playing. Ryan called me after that conversation, and told me what Lily had said, and I laughed for the first time in a while about something involving this situation, and Ryan laughed too, and it was the first time the situation had produced laughter, and I thought that laughter was probably a good sign. Story 5 Reddit Relationship Stories. My husband asked for a divorce the day after I was diagnosed with cancer. What he did next surprised everyone. My name is Patricia. I am 47 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. And 2 years ago my husband of 16 years asked me for a divorce the day after I received a breast cancer diagnosis. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table where I had sat the previous day absorbing a diagnosis from my oncologist. And he said he needed to tell me something, and he told me he had been unhappy for 3 years, and that he wanted a divorce. I want to tell you what happened next, because what happened next is the part nobody expects. My husband's name is Richard. He is 51 years old, and he is not a cruel person. I want to be clear about that because the timing of what he said was cruel, but Richard is not a cruel person, and the distinction matters for understanding everything that followed. Richard had not known I was going to be diagnosed with cancer. He had been planning to have this conversation for several weeks, and had chosen a weekend when the children were at my mother's, and had not known that the previous day I would receive a diagnosis that would make his timing what it was. He said what he had come to say. He did not know, when he sat down, what he was sitting down into. I told him about the diagnosis. I told him the day before I had been told I had breast cancer, and that I had not yet told him because I had been absorbing it. Richard went white. Then he was quiet for a very long time. Then he said he was not going anywhere. I told him I had not asked him to stay. He said he knew and that he was telling me he was not going anywhere because it was true and not because I had asked. We did not talk about the divorce again for 4 months. Richard was at every oncologist appointment. He was at the surgery. He was at every chemotherapy infusion, sitting in the chair next to mine, bringing the specific snacks my oncologist had said were okay, driving me home, staying up when I could not sleep. He did not move out. He did not file anything. He was present in the way of someone who has made a decision and is honoring it. 4 months after his original conversation, I was in my second round of chemotherapy and Richard and I had a conversation that was the most honest of our marriage. He told me the full story of the 3 years, the unhappiness, its specific shape, the things that had accumulated and the things that had been missing. I told him things I had been holding about my own experience of those 3 years. We talked for 6 hours over 2 evenings with a couples therapist present for the second of them. The therapist said something in that second session that I have thought about since. She said that crisis sometimes creates the conditions for honesty that comfort could not produce. The cancer had created conditions in which neither of us was willing to be less than fully honest because the cost of dishonesty had become too visible. Richard and I are still married. We are in a different marriage than we were before his conversation, and before my diagnosis. The different marriage is more honest and more deliberate and more conscious of what it contains and what it requires. My cancer is in remission. My most recent scans are clear. I go back in 4 months for a follow-up. Richard drives me to every scan. He sits in the waiting room, and he is there when I come out and he asks me how I am before he asks anything else and I tell him and we drive home and make dinner. And I think that making dinner together after a scan is one of the specific forms that love takes when it has been through what ours has been through. Update 4 months later. My scan last month was clear. Richard was in the waiting room when I came out, and I told him it was clear, and he closed his eyes for a moment in the specific way of someone releasing something they have been holding. We drove home. He made dinner. My favorite, something he had learned to make during chemotherapy because it was one of the few things I could eat. We ate and we talked and we went to bed and I lay there thinking about a kitchen table 2 years ago, and about everything that had happened at and around, and because of that table. And I thought that the table had been the beginning of something rather than the end of something. And that beginning was the right word for what we had been doing ever since.